Exiled after her mother's death, the little alien girl nearly died, but a human appeared. The city had never seemed so cold. Lyra, the little alien girl, wandered through the deserted streets, her small frame trembling under the weight of grief and fear. The sun of her homeworld burned bright, but it brought no warmth to her heart. Only yesterday her mother had been alive, her soft voice full of encouragement and love. Now, the echo of her mother's laughter haunted the empty corridors of the grand city. Lyra's mother had been a diplomat, respected and known for her fairness and intelligence. But the moment her life ended, the protections around Lyra vanished like mist. The council had been swift. They declared her a burden. In the blink of an eye, she was exiled, cast out into the outskirts of a world she barely understood. Her neighbors avoided her now, fearing the council's wrath. Friends from school no longer waved or smiled. The city, which had once felt safe and familiar, became a labyrinth of danger. Each alley seemed longer, each shadow deeper. She had no money, no home, and no one to turn to. Every step felt heavier than the last, and hunger gnawed at her stomach, sharp and unrelenting. Lyra stumbled over the cracked pavement, her small hands scraped and bleeding from the rough stones. Her body, though alien, was fragile, and she felt the weariness creeping into her limbs. Her mind wandered to memories of her mother, warm evenings spent together, stories of distant stars and planets, lessons in diplomacy and courage. Tears fell silently, tracing pale trails down her tiny face. She had never felt so alone, and the fear of never seeing another kind face gnawed at her. By nightfall, the city outskirts were a place of shadows and whispers. The glowing towers of the central city shimmered like distant constellations, unreachable from her corner of the world. Lyra curled up against a jagged wall, shivering in the chill. She had eaten nothing all day, and her strength was fading fast. Her alien physiology could endure many hardships, but even she had limits. Her eyelids grew heavy, and she struggled to keep her mind awake, not ready to surrender to the darkness that threatened to claim her. The wind whispered through the empty streets, carrying with it the faint metallic scent of the city. Lyra's ears twitched at every sound, the clatter of distant machinery, the echo of footsteps far away, the hum of energy shields protecting the distant towers. She tried to remember what her mother had taught her about staying calm, about thinking clearly, about using her mind when her body was weak. But the lessons felt hollow now. The city was merciless. It had no sympathy for grief or innocence. She shivered again, wrapping her small arms around her knees. The shadows seemed to move closer, as if the city itself were watching her, waiting for her to fail. Hunger burned through her like a fire she could not escape. Every muscle ached, every breath felt like effort. She closed her eyes for just a moment, imagining the comfort of her mother's embrace, the gentle words that had once soothed her fears. Suddenly, a sound broke the monotony. It was strange and unfamiliar, sharp and precise, a low hum that grew louder with each passing second. Lyra's ears twitched in alarm. The hum did not belong to the city. It was foreign, a sound that her species rarely encountered. She blinked, struggling to lift herself from the hard ground, and saw something moving on the horizon. A small craft, unlike anything she had seen, descended from the sky. Its shape was smooth, metallic, and gleaming in the fading sunlight. Lyra froze, unsure whether to hide or run. Her instincts screamed danger, but something about the craft drew her in. It did not resemble the vehicles of her people, nor did it carry the imposing insignia of the council. This was something else, something unknown. The ship landed gently in the clearing, stirring a cloud of dust and small debris. A hatch opened, and a figure stepped out. Lyra blinked, her eyes wide with disbelief. The being was human. She had only seen pictures in old history texts, only heard myths whispered about their strange ways and unpredictable behavior. Humans were considered outsiders, myths of power and danger. But the figure before her did not radiate hostility. Instead, there was a calm presence, a careful attentiveness in the way the human moved. He knelt down immediately when he saw her, his eyes scanning her fragile form. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft, unfamiliar, but gentle. Lyra did not understand the words, but the tone was clear. He meant no harm. She stayed frozen, her small body too tired to react. The human, sensing her weakness, reached slowly into his pack and pulled out small containers of liquid and food. He offered them carefully, his eyes never leaving hers, giving her the space to respond. Lyra's stomach growled at the sight. She hesitated, unsure whether to trust him. Her mother had always warned her about strangers, about outsiders who might have hidden agendas. Yet something in the human's steady, careful movements reassured her. He did not rush. He did not demand. He simply waited, ready to help. Slowly she inched forward, letting him place the small container of liquid to her lips. The warmth spread through her, reviving her body in ways she had thought impossible. As she drank, the human spoke again, using gentle tones and slow gestures. He seemed to understand that she could not comprehend his language fully, so he repeated words and motions, showing patience she had never experienced. For hours, he sat with her, ensuring that she could drink, that she could eat, that she would survive the night. His presence, so foreign yet comforting, began to ease her fear. Night fell fully, and the stars above seemed to shine brighter than they ever had in her memory. Lyra curled up in a small space the human had prepared for her in the ship. She had never slept this peacefully since her exile began. The last time she had felt this safe was in her mother's embrace. She drifted into sleep, her mind filled with stars, not city walls, with warmth, not hunger, with trust, not fear. While Lyra slept, the human kept watch. He adjusted the ship's systems quietly, monitoring the surroundings with a careful eye. He knew little about the alien world's politics or the reasons for her exile, but he understood something far more important: the value of preserving life, no matter how small or fragile. He was an outsider, but he had chosen to act with compassion. The city might have turned its back, but he would not. As the hours passed, Lyra's breathing grew steady, her body regaining the strength she had lost. Dreams of her mother returned, softer now, mingled with the strange but comforting presence of the human who had saved her. In her sleep she reached out, her small hand brushing against the warmth of his coat, as if sensing the protector who had appeared when she needed one most. The night deepened, and the city, oblivious to the small drama unfolding in its outskirts, continued its distant hum. But in this quiet corner, a small alien girl was learning something extraordinary. Even in the vast, indifferent universe, there were beings who could care, who could act with empathy beyond instinct, who could show courage not through power but through kindness. By the time the first rays of dawn touched the edges of the city, Lyra had already begun to awaken. Her eyes opened slowly, blinking against the light. The human was still there, watching over her, ready to guide her, ready to teach her, ready to protect her. For the first time since her mother's death, Lyra felt hope, not for revenge, not for escape, but for survival. And more than that, she felt the faint, powerful notion that she might yet find friendship in a universe that had seemed empty and hostile. That morning marked the beginning of a journey that neither Lyra nor the human could yet fully understand. A journey that would test courage, resilience, and ingenuity. A journey where the fragile bonds of trust between two very different beings could change not only one life, but perhaps the course of many. Lyra had survived her exile through chance, but she would continue through choice. And her first choice was to trust the human who had appeared in the moment she had nearly lost everything. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting golden streaks across the dusty plains. Surrounding the city, Lyra blinked as she took in her new surroundings. The human's ship, sleek and unlike anything she had seen before, sat quietly in a small clearing. Its metal gleamed in the morning light, and strange symbols adorned its sides, glowing faintly. For a moment she felt small and insignificant beneath its vast structure, but she also felt safe, a feeling she had not experienced for days. The human, Caleb, was already moving inside the ship, preparing a simple breakfast for her. He did not speak loudly, not wanting to startle her. Instead, he worked with calm efficiency, assembling nutrient packs and small containers of water. Lyra watched quietly, hesitant to speak, hesitant even to move. She still did not fully understand him, and his species was unlike anything she had ever known. But there was kindness in his eyes, a warmth that slowly began to melt the fear that had clung to her like a shadow. "Eat," he said softly, pointing to the small packet of food. The words were foreign, but the tone was gentle, inviting. Lyra took it cautiously, her hands trembling. The food was strange, unfamiliar, but it filled her stomach in a way she had not felt in days. The hunger that had seemed endless began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of trust. Caleb watched her closely, noting the way she handled the food, the way she responded to his gestures. He did not rush her. He understood instinctively that trust had to be earned, that fear could not be forced away with words alone. For hours, he remained by her side, offering water and small meals, teaching her simple phrases in his language. Lyra struggled at first, repeating sounds incorrectly, but Caleb smiled and corrected her gently, never showing impatience. As the day progressed, Caleb allowed her to explore the ship under his supervision. Lyra's small hands traced the smooth surfaces, fascinated by the controls, the screens, and the soft hum of the engines. She pressed buttons cautiously, and Caleb showed her which ones were safe to touch. The ship became a classroom, and Caleb, a teacher without even trying. She learned to understand gestures, simple commands, and basic navigation. Slowly, she began to mimic his actions, gaining confidence in her ability to interact with this strange human world. Outside, the landscape stretched endlessly, dusty plains dotted with strange rock formations and patches of hardy alien vegetation. Caleb took her to the viewport, showing her the horizon, pointing to distant stars and planets. He spoke in his soft, measured voice, using gestures to explain directions, distances, and navigation. Lyra listened attentively, her mind absorbing everything. She had never imagined that the universe could feel so vast, yet safe in the presence of one being who truly cared. As night approached, the situation became tense. Lyra's homeworld council had not forgotten her. Scouts from the city were already searching the outskirts, their ships hovering over the desert, scanning for signs of life. Caleb noticed the movements on his instruments and explained, with simple words and gestures, that they needed to move quickly to avoid detection. Lyra felt a flicker of fear, but it was different this time. She was no longer entirely alone. She had someone who could protect her, someone who could guide her through dangers she could not face alone. Caleb prepared the ship for takeoff. Lyra watched, fascinated, as the engines roared to life. The ship lifted from the ground smoothly, the dust swirling beneath them like a golden cloud. For the first time since her exile began, Lyra felt a sense of freedom. She pressed her small hands against the viewport, staring at the city shrinking below them. Her heart ached with a mixture of sadness and hope. The city had rejected her, cast her aside, yet beyond its walls, the universe seemed full of possibilities she had never dreamed of. The journey through space was long, but Caleb made it engaging. He taught Lyra about the stars, about how planets moved, about how life could exist in forms she had never imagined. He pointed out different constellations, explaining how humans navigated the vast distances between worlds. Lyra listened with wide eyes, amazed by the knowledge and ingenuity of this human being. He did not boast or demand respect. He simply shared, patiently and kindly, as one might teach a child. During the trip, they encountered a small asteroid field. Caleb guided the ship expertly, showing Lyra how to anticipate movements and avoid collisions. At first, she was frightened, clinging to the seat and the straps, but Caleb's calm voice reassured her. He explained each maneuver carefully, using gestures and simple words. Slowly, Lyra began to understand the principles of navigation and movement in space. She was learning more in a few days than she had in her entire short life on her homeworld. One evening, as they rested near a small, safe asteroid outpost, Lyra finally spoke. "Why help me?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Caleb paused, considering her question. "Because," he said slowly, "life is important. All life. No one should die alone if I can help." Lyra did not fully understand his words, but she felt their meaning. It was a concept almost foreign to her species. To act for the sake of kindness alone, without power, reward, or fear of consequence. The idea fascinated her, and she felt a warmth inside her chest, a feeling she had not experienced since her mother's death. Caleb continued to teach her through practical experiences. He showed her how to repair the ship's basic systems, how to monitor energy levels, and how to maintain life support. Lyra struggled at first, dropping tools or misreading displays, but Caleb encouraged her, praising her when she succeeded and guiding her patiently when she failed. The little alien's confidence grew with each passing day. She was no longer entirely helpless. She had skills, knowledge, and a companion who trusted her. As days turned into weeks, Lyra and Caleb developed a routine. Mornings were for learning and exploration, afternoons for maintenance and practice, evenings for stories and observation of the stars. Caleb told her stories about humans, about their ingenuity, resilience, and sometimes their failures. Lyra listened eagerly, fascinated by the differences between human and alien cultures. She began to notice patterns, similarities, and lessons she could apply to her own life. The small alien girl realized that survival was not just about avoiding danger. It was about learning, adapting, and trusting others. Their journey was not without danger. Once, they encountered a rogue patrol drone from Lyra's homeworld. It scanned the area aggressively, searching for her presence. Caleb acted quickly, guiding the ship into a narrow asteroid belt to hide from detection. Lyra watched in awe as he calculated movements and adjustments faster than she could comprehend. She felt a surge of admiration, mixed with a budding realization. Humans, though different, possessed a strength beyond physical power. They had ingenuity, patience, and courage. She had been wrong to fear them. She had been wrong to underestimate the value of their actions. During quiet moments, Caleb allowed Lyra to rest while he maintained the ship. She slept deeply, dreaming of stars, distant worlds, and sometimes her mother. She no longer felt completely alone in her dreams. There was always a presence beside her, a human who cared, who would not abandon her. In those dreams, she even imagined herself strong, resourceful, and brave, qualities she had not associated with herself before. One afternoon, as they navigated a calm stretch of space, Lyra attempted to replicate one of Caleb's small repairs. She fumbled at first, dropping tools and making mistakes, but Caleb did not scold her. Instead, he guided her hands, showing her gently how to apply the correct pressure, how to read the readings on the monitor, how to anticipate the system's responses. Slowly, she succeeded. A small smile appeared on her face, and Caleb's approving nod made her heart swell. For the first time since her exile, she felt competent, capable, and important. Through the weeks, Lyra also began to learn more about human emotions. She noticed the subtle cues in Caleb's face, the way his tone changed when he was concerned or pleased. She began to mimic these cues in her own expressions, attempting to communicate feelings she had never been taught to express. Caleb noticed her efforts and responded with encouragement, teaching her that emotions were not weaknesses but tools to connect with others. This lesson was foreign to her species, which often valued logic and rules above all else. Yet, Lyra felt its truth deep within her. By the time they reached a small, remote planet suitable for temporary refuge, Lyra had changed. She was still small, still fragile in appearance, but her mind had grown sharper, her confidence stronger. She no longer clung blindly to Caleb. She observed, learned, and even suggested small actions herself. Caleb welcomed her contributions, treating her not just as a child to be protected, but as a partner in survival. The trust between them deepened, becoming a bond that transcended species and language. As night fell on their new refuge, Lyra gazed up at the unfamiliar sky. The stars were different from those she remembered from her homeworld, yet just as beautiful. She realized that the universe was vast, full of dangers, but also full of possibilities. She thought of her mother, of the city that had exiled her, and of the human who had appeared when she had nearly lost everything. She understood now that kindness and courage could exist even in the darkest places. And with that understanding, she felt hope for the first time since her mother's death. She looked at Caleb, who was quietly working on the ship, and whispered in the small alien words she had learned to combine with human sounds, "Thank you." Caleb paused, his eyes softening, and nodded. There was no need for further words. Lyra had survived the first trials of exile, and the human had taught her lessons that no council or city could ever provide. The journey was far from over. The council still searched for her. The universe was full of dangers she could not yet imagine. But Lyra no longer felt helpless. She had a teacher, a protector, and a friend. She had learned that life, no matter how small or fragile, was worth protecting, and that courage came in many forms. And in that quiet, starlit moment, the little alien girl knew that she was no longer entirely alone, and that perhaps she never would be again. The days on the remote planet passed slowly, yet each one carried a lesson. Lyra woke each morning to the soft hum of the ship's engines and the warm, steady presence of Caleb. The alien girl had learned much about survival, navigation, and even small repairs, but the universe was vast, and its dangers often came unexpectedly. While the planet itself was peaceful, with rolling plains, crystal-clear streams, and alien flora that glowed faintly in the night, Lyra and Caleb knew they could not stay long. Scouts from her homeworld were still searching, their sensors combing the void for signs of her life. Caleb had set up a simple base near a small grove of luminescent plants. It was safe, but not invisible. Lyra often watched him as he worked, patching minor damage on the ship, calibrating sensors, or checking supplies, and noticed the care he took in every task. He never rushed. Every movement was precise, deliberate, and designed not just to protect himself but to teach her how to act wisely. Lyra tried to imitate his motions, her small hands fumbling over tools, but Caleb was patient. "Slowly," he would say, gesturing with a calm hand. "Think, watch, learn, then act." One morning, while Caleb prepared supplies for exploration, Lyra wandered toward the edge of their small settlement. She had been itching to learn more about the world outside the clearing, to test her growing skills and courage. She crouched by a stream, watching small, glowing fish swim in the alien water. The water was warm and soothing, unlike the cold rivers near her home city. Lyra scooped a handful and let it slip through her fingers, marveling at how it caught the morning light. Caleb noticed her curiosity and smiled, though he did not approach immediately. "Exploring is good," he said, his words slow and deliberate, "but always watch the horizon." Lyra nodded, understanding the meaning even if she did not know all the words. She felt a surge of excitement and pride. For the first time since her exile, she was free to explore without fear of punishment or exile. As the day progressed, Caleb began teaching her more complex skills. He showed her how to monitor energy levels in the ship, how to repair minor damage to the hull, and how to detect approaching threats from both air and space. Lyra struggled at first. Her small hands were clumsy, and she often misread the instruments. But Caleb never criticized her. Instead, he guided her gently, showing her the correct method repeatedly until she understood. With each success, her confidence grew, and the shadow of fear that had haunted her since her mother's death began to fade. One afternoon, while calibrating the ship's sensors, Caleb noticed a faint energy signature moving in the distance. He quickly scanned and realized that it was a scout drone from Lyra's homeworld. The Council had not forgotten her. The drone's sensors were rudimentary, but it could still alert the patrols to her location if she was careless. "Lyra," Caleb said, kneeling beside her, "we have visitors." The alien girl's ears twitched and her small body stiffened. Fear rose in her chest, but it was tempered by the knowledge that she was not alone. Caleb guided her to a concealed position behind a cluster of luminescent trees. He showed her how to observe without being seen, how to anticipate the drone's path, and how to move silently if necessary. The drone hovered briefly, scanning the area, its sensors flickering. Lyra held her breath, her small claws digging into the soft earth. Caleb's calm presence beside her gave her courage. He did not rush her, did not panic. He simply observed, calculated, and waited. Slowly, the drone moved on, its sensors failing to detect them. Lyra exhaled quietly, a mixture of relief and exhilaration flooding her senses. She had survived the encounter, not because of magic or luck, but because of skill, patience, and careful observation, the lessons Caleb had taught her. That evening, as the twin suns of the planet began to set, Lyra sat beside Caleb outside the ship. The sky shifted from gold to deep purple streaked with stars. Caleb handed her a small piece of alien fruit glowing faintly in the twilight. "Eat," he said, and she did, savoring the sweet taste. "Why they want me?" she asked finally, her voice small but steady. Caleb considered his answer carefully. "Because they see you as weak," he said. "They think fear can control you, but you are not weak, not anymore." Lyra blinked, considering his words. She had learned that humans measured strength differently than her people did. It was not only about power or influence. It was about courage, resilience, and intelligence. She felt the truth of it deep within her. Over the next few days, Caleb allowed Lyra to take a more active role in their safety. He taught her to scan the horizon, to anticipate threats, and even to pilot small sections of the ship under his supervision. Lyra was hesitant at first. The controls were complex, and one mistake could be dangerous. But Caleb's calm voice encouraged her, and slowly she began to gain confidence. Her small hands pressed buttons, adjusted levers, and monitored displays, each action reinforcing her confidence and independence. One morning, while exploring a nearby valley, Lyra stumbled upon a creature native to the planet. It was large, with glowing eyes and thick, silvery fur. It regarded her cautiously, its movements deliberate and measured. Lyra froze, unsure whether it was dangerous. Caleb noticed and motioned for her to stay calm. He approached slowly, speaking in his gentle voice. The creature sniffed the air, then relaxed. Caleb extended a hand, and the creature allowed him to touch its fur. Lyra watched in awe. She realized that patience, observation, and calm action could solve problems that brute force never could. During their stay, Lyra also learned about the principles of navigation and strategy. Caleb explained how humans used observation, planning, and improvisation to survive in environments far more dangerous than the peaceful valley they now inhabited. Lyra listened intently, her mind absorbing the knowledge. She began to see patterns, to anticipate outcomes, and to understand that intelligence and courage could often be more powerful than raw strength. Their peaceful days were interrupted one evening when a small energy pulse appeared on the ship's sensors. Caleb examined it carefully. "Scout from the city," he said. "They are getting closer." Lyra's ears twitched in alarm, but she did not panic. She remembered the lessons Caleb had taught her: stay calm, observe, plan. She followed his instructions, helping him to hide the ship and obscure its energy signature. Together, they created a decoy signal to mislead the patrol. When the drone passed without detecting them, Lyra felt a rush of pride. She had contributed. She had protected herself. She was learning to survive. Nightfall brought another lesson. Caleb guided Lyra through the stars, teaching her about the constellations and their use in navigation. He showed her how to read subtle changes in light, how to interpret distant signals, and how to use natural patterns to anticipate movement. Lyra was fascinated. Her mind, once overwhelmed by fear and grief, now buzzed with curiosity and determination. She realized that the universe was vast, full of challenges, but also full of opportunities to learn and grow. In the quiet hours, Lyra began to reflect on her life before exile. She remembered her mother's teachings, her home city, and the council that had rejected her. But now she could see her own strength. She was learning to act, to think, to survive. She was no longer a helpless child cast aside by the world. She was becoming someone capable, someone who could face danger with intelligence and courage. And she had Caleb to thank, not only for protection but for showing her a way to be strong without cruelty. One day, they received another sign of the Council's pursuit. A probe ship appeared on the edge of the planet's atmosphere. Caleb quickly guided Lyra to a hidden cave system he had discovered earlier. There, he taught her how to observe the probe's movements, how to interpret its signals, and how to prepare for potential interception. Lyra listened, her small body tense but her mind alert. For the first time, she realized that she could think strategically, that she could contribute to their safety, and that her survival was not entirely dependent on Caleb. As the probe left without discovering them, Lyra felt a sense of accomplishment and pride. She had faced danger, learned to act wisely, and survived. She understood now that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. And she had learned that intelligence, patience, and observation could often outmatch raw power and brute force. Days turned into weeks, and Lyra continued to grow in skill and confidence. She repaired minor systems on the ship, learned to pilot short distances, and even began to assist Caleb in planning routes to avoid patrols. She discovered that humans valued intelligence and careful thought, not just strength, and she began to integrate these lessons into her own thinking. One evening, as the twin suns of the planet set, casting long shadows across the valley, Lyra stood beside Caleb and looked out over the plains. The light reflected in her eyes, bright and determined. She realized that the universe, vast and full of dangers, also held opportunity. She could survive, she could thrive, and she could do so not alone but with allies, first among them the human who had saved her when she had nearly lost everything. Lyra whispered softly, a mixture of her alien language and the human words she had learned. "I can do this." Caleb smiled, not because she had spoken perfectly, but because he understood the courage behind her words. She had grown beyond fear, beyond helplessness. She had begun to embrace her own strength, her own intelligence, and her own courage. And together, they would continue their journey through the universe, learning, surviving, and discovering the true meaning of friendship, trust, and hope. That night, as the stars sparkled above the quiet valley, Lyra lay down beside Caleb in the safety of the hidden cave. She felt warmth, security, and the thrill of knowing she was no longer alone. She had survived exile, she had learned courage, and she had discovered that life, even in its most fragile forms, was worth protecting. And she knew, deep within her, that this was only the beginning of a journey that would test her, challenge her, and ultimately reveal the extraordinary power of trust, intelligence, and human compassion. The remote planet stretched endlessly beneath the twin suns, its surface, dotted with alien trees and shimmering crystal formations that reflected light in strange and beautiful patterns. Lyra had grown more confident in her abilities, but Caleb knew that comfort could be dangerous. The council of her homeworld would not give up easily. They would send more scouts, perhaps even larger patrols, and Lyra needed to be prepared for anything. Caleb began the day with a simple lesson, though it was more than just words. He handed Lyra a small toolkit and guided her to the ship, explaining that even minor damage could become a threat if left unattended. Lyra listened carefully, her small hands gripping the tools as Caleb demonstrated how to check wiring, adjust circuits, and maintain energy flows. At first she struggled, fumbling with screws and panels, but Caleb's patience never wavered. "Think," he said. "Watch, then act." One mistake could cost more than time. Hours passed as they worked together. Lyra's concentration sharpened, her movements becoming more deliberate and confident. She began to understand that survival was not about rushing or fighting blindly. It was about observation, understanding, and careful action. She adjusted panels correctly, calibrated sensors, and even suggested small improvements, which Caleb accepted with a nod and a smile. Each success built her confidence, reminding her that she was no longer powerless. After repairs, Caleb decided it was time for another lesson in exploration and observation. He guided Lyra through the nearby forest, showing her how to notice subtle signs of movement: broken branches, disturbed soil, faint energy traces that might indicate passing life forms. Lyra's alien eyes, sharper than most humans, picked up tiny details Caleb had overlooked. She realized that combining her species' natural abilities with Caleb's guidance made her more effective than she had ever been alone. As they ventured deeper into the forest, Lyra noticed faint tracks that did not belong to the native creatures of the planet. She pointed them out to Caleb, who crouched to examine them carefully. "Scout Patrol," he said. "They are close." Lyra's small body tensed, but Caleb placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Stay calm, observe, plan. You can do this." They spent the afternoon learning how to avoid detection. Caleb taught her to move silently over rocks and roots, to blend shadows, and to anticipate patrol movements. At first, Lyra's steps were uncertain, her small feet slipping on alien terrain, but with guidance, she moved gracefully, silent and deliberate. She felt a thrill of pride and independence. For the first time, she realized that she could evade danger not by running blindly, but by thinking, observing, and acting with skill. That evening, they returned to the ship. Caleb allowed Lyra to help navigate, guiding her hands over the controls and showing her how to read the energy signatures of nearby patrols. Lyra concentrated, matching her movements to his instructions. When a scout passed at the edge of the clearing, she held her breath but followed Caleb's guidance perfectly. The scout did not detect them. Lyra exhaled quietly, a smile spreading across her face. She had survived, learned, and acted with intelligence and courage, qualities her homeworld had never expected from a little exiled child. The next day, Caleb decided it was time to expand their skills further. He showed Lyra how to collect and store resources from the planet. They gathered alien fruits, filtered water from natural streams, and learned to identify safe and dangerous plants. Caleb explained the principles of sustainability, teaching her that survival was not just about immediate needs, but about long-term planning. Lyra absorbed the lessons quickly, her curiosity and sharp mind helping her remember details and anticipate challenges. While gathering food, Lyra discovered a small, glowing creature hiding among the plants. It had multiple limbs and eyes that reflected the light like tiny stars. Caleb crouched beside her, showing her how to observe without startling it. "Not all creatures are threats," he said. "Watch, learn, respect." Lyra watched the creature carefully, noting its movements and behavior. When it finally scuttled away, she understood the lesson. Intelligence and patience could solve problems as effectively as strength or weapons. During the evenings, Lyra and Caleb worked on navigation exercises. He taught her to chart routes through the nearby asteroid belts and to use stars as guides. Lyra was fascinated by the patterns, the way humans could predict movement and make plans based on observation and calculation. She began to see parallels between her mother's teachings and Caleb's methods. Both valued strategy and foresight, but Caleb's methods included compassion and patience, lessons her homeworld had rarely emphasized. One day, while exploring a valley with tall, crystalline structures, Lyra noticed a faint energy signature approaching. Caleb quickly assessed it, another scout patrol. He motioned for her to follow him into a narrow crevice between the crystals. "Watch, breathe, think," he instructed. Lyra crouched, her eyes scanning the approaching patrol. She noticed a slight irregularity in their movement, a small delay in their scanning pattern. "We can slip past here," she whispered, surprising even herself. Caleb nodded, impressed. They moved together, careful and deliberate, and passed undetected. Lyra felt a surge of pride. She had not only survived, she had contributed to their safety. As night fell, the two returned to their base. Lyra was exhausted but exhilarated. She realized that every challenge they faced taught her something new: patience, observation, strategy, courage, and ingenuity. She had been a helpless child when she was exiled, but now she was learning to navigate danger with intelligence and skill. Caleb's teachings had unlocked potential she had never known existed within her. Over the next weeks, Lyra and Caleb continued to explore the planet, each day building skill, confidence, and trust. They constructed a small, concealed workshop near their base where Lyra could experiment with repairs and modifications. She learned to improvise tools, create simple devices, and even make small improvements to the ship systems. Caleb encouraged her creativity, praising her successes and guiding her when she made mistakes. Lyra began to understand that ingenuity and courage could be more powerful than raw strength. One morning, while scanning the surrounding plains, Lyra spotted a small patrol drone far in the distance. She alerted Caleb, who guided her through the steps to avoid detection. Together, they moved silently through the terrain, hiding behind rocks and trees, timing their movements to the patrol's scanning pattern. Lyra felt a sense of mastery. She was no longer merely surviving, she was actively participating in her protection. Her small size and quick reflexes, combined with her sharp mind, made her an asset in ways even Caleb could appreciate. That night, as they rested under the alien stars, Lyra reflected on how far she had come. She remembered the fear and hunger of her first days after exile, the moments when she had almost given up. Now, she felt strength, confidence, and hope. She had learned skills she never imagined she could possess, and she had discovered that humans, though different from her species, possessed qualities she deeply admired: patience, ingenuity, and compassion. Caleb noticed her thoughtful expression. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Lyra hesitated, then said slowly, "I can survive, and I can help." Caleb smiled. "Yes," he said, "you can. That is the most important lesson." For the first time, Lyra understood the full meaning of his teachings. Survival was not just about escaping danger. It was about understanding, adapting, and contributing. She had grown from a frightened child into someone capable of facing the universe with intelligence and courage. As the days passed, their bond deepened. Caleb taught her not only survival skills, but also the importance of empathy and trust. He showed her that every creature, every being, could be understood, respected, and even helped if approached with patience and observation. Lyra began to see the universe not only as a place of danger, but also as a place of opportunity. She could survive, thrive, and perhaps even change the outcomes for others who faced cruelty or neglect. One evening, while charting a course through a nearby asteroid belt, Lyra asked Caleb, "Why you help me? No one else does." Caleb paused, considering. "Because life matters," he said simply. "All life, every being has value. And because sometimes, doing the right thing matters more than fear or rules." Lyra thought about her council, her city, and the rules that had cast her aside. For the first time, she understood that courage and morality were not defined by law or power, but by actions. The council's threat was never far. Scouts continued to patrol the outer regions of the planet, and Lyra and Caleb remained vigilant. Each encounter, each observation, and each lesson strengthened her skills and her mind. She learned to anticipate danger, make plans, and act decisively. Her alien abilities, combined with Caleb's teachings, made her uniquely capable of surviving challenges that her species alone might have struggled with. Lyra also began to develop a sense of purpose. She was no longer merely surviving. She was learning, growing, and preparing for the day when she might confront the council or protect others who were vulnerable. The lessons Caleb taught her went beyond survival. They were lessons in strategy, empathy, and courage. And she knew that these skills would serve her for the rest of her life. As night fell on their remote base, Lyra gazed up at the stars once more. The universe seemed vast and full of possibilities, far beyond what she had imagined when she was alone and exiled. She realized that she had been given a second chance, not just at survival, but at learning, growing, and discovering the strength within herself. And she knew, with a certainty that filled her small heart, that she would not waste this chance. Lyra awoke to the soft hum of the ship, the light from the twin suns spilling over the horizon of the remote planet. She had grown in skill, confidence, and understanding over the past weeks, yet she knew the greatest challenges were still ahead. Caleb had taught her to survive, to observe, to think strategically, and to trust her own judgment. But the council of her homeworld, relentless in their pursuit, would not give up so easily. They believed her weak, vulnerable, and expendable, but they had underestimated her. Caleb stood at the controls, his eyes scanning the instruments for any sign of approaching danger. "Today," he said softly, "we prepare for what may come. You are ready, Lyra. You have learned more than you realize." Lyra nodded, a sense of determination filling her small frame. She no longer felt the helplessness that had defined her first days of exile. She had skills, knowledge, and courage. She had learned that life, intelligence, and moral strength could overcome fear and power. Their first task was to move the ship to a safer location. Caleb explained each step, showing Lyra how to calculate energy output, anticipate gravitational shifts, and maintain stealth from distant scanners. Lyra's small hands moved confidently over the controls, applying the lessons Caleb had taught her. They navigated through asteroid fields, past rocky outcroppings, and around the edges of the planet's atmosphere. Each maneuver was precise, each decision deliberate. The little alien girl had grown into someone capable of handling danger with intelligence and patience. During the journey, Caleb taught Lyra about communication. He explained how humans could coordinate across vast distances using encrypted signals, and how observation and timing could convey information without revealing location. Lyra absorbed these lessons eagerly, realizing that her survival depended not only on physical skill, but also on her ability to think, plan, and anticipate. Her mind, once clouded with fear and grief, now worked like a well-tuned instrument, analyzing, calculating, and predicting. As they approached the outskirts of her homeworld's territory, Lyra's heart raced. From above, the sprawling city looked smaller, its towers glinting in the distance, the streets now familiar yet distant memories of loss. The council still believed her exiled, discarded, and alone. They did not know that she had learned to survive, to adapt, and to think beyond fear. Caleb noticed the change in her expression and placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Remember," he said, "we act with care and patience. Strength is not always in force but in wisdom." The first test came quickly. A patrol drone scanned the perimeter, its sensors sweeping the terrain with precise calculation. Lyra crouched behind a ridge, following Caleb's instructions. She studied the patterns, predicted the drone's movements, and adjusted their ship's position to remain hidden. Her pulse raced, but she remained calm. This was no longer fear. It was focus, strategy, and intelligence applied under pressure. The drone passed without detecting them. Lyra exhaled quietly, a small smile forming on her lips. She had learned not just to survive, but to master the environment around her. Over the next days, Lyra and Caleb prepared for their final challenge, confronting the Council's indirect threats and ensuring her safety permanently. They gathered supplies, analyzed patrol routes, and practiced maneuvers through terrain both on the planet and in orbit. Lyra's confidence grew with each passing day. She no longer relied solely on Caleb. She contributed ideas, anticipated dangers, and even suggested strategic diversions. The bond between them had evolved from protector and child to teacher and partner, united by trust, respect, and shared purpose. One evening, while resting beneath the alien stars, Lyra spoke quietly. "I want to face them," she said, her voice steady but soft. Caleb turned to her, surprised but attentive. "Face them? You mean the Council?" he asked. Lyra nodded. "Not with violence," she explained, "but to show them I am not weak, that I can survive, that I am more than they believe." Caleb considered her words, then smiled. "Yes," he said, "that is courage, and courage without cruelty is true strength." The next day, they executed their plan. Using stealth and strategy, Lyra and Caleb approached a location near the city where Council communications were monitored. They avoided patrols, bypassed sensors, and positioned the ship to intercept transmissions. Lyra had learned from Caleb how to observe patterns, decode signals, and communicate subtly. She now applied these lessons with precision. Every step, every calculation, was a testament to the intelligence, patience, and ingenuity she had gained. Lyra tapped into the Council's communication channels using the tools Caleb had helped her modify. She did not speak aloud. Instead, she transmitted carefully coded messages that revealed only her presence, her survival, and her knowledge. The Council, expecting her to be helpless and exiled, received a signal that challenged their assumptions. It was not a threat, not a demand, simply a statement of existence, skill, and courage. Lyra had learned to use intelligence as her weapon, to convey power without violence, to communicate her strength where brute force would fail. The response from the Council was immediate. They scrambled drones and patrol ships, attempting to locate the source of the signal. Lyra watched calmly, guiding Caleb in evasive maneuvers. She anticipated their strategies, predicting movements, and adjusting the ship's course with precision. Each decision reflected the lessons of patience, observation, and intelligence Caleb had taught her. She realized that true strength came not from fear or force, but from knowledge, adaptability, and courage. Through careful planning, they avoided capture while demonstrating to the Council that Lyra was no longer the helpless child they had exiled. The drones and patrols failed to find her, their efforts hampered by her strategic thinking, careful observation, and swift, precise actions. Lyra felt a deep satisfaction. She had survived not by chance, but by applying everything she had learned. She had turned vulnerability into strength, fear into courage, and exile into opportunity. Caleb watched her with pride. "You have grown beyond what I could have imagined," he said softly. Lyra smiled, realizing that this journey had not been about survival alone. It had been about learning to trust, to think, and to act with intelligence and compassion. She had discovered that strength was not defined by power or fear, but by knowledge, courage, and the choices one made when facing adversity. As the twin suns set once more, Lyra transmitted one final message to the Council. It was not a demand, not a threat, but a statement of existence and purpose. She was alive, capable, and prepared. The Council, forced to recognize her skills and intelligence, could no longer treat her as weak or expendable. Through patience, observation, and strategy, Lyra had transformed exile into empowerment. With the Council's pursuit temporarily halted, Lyra and Caleb set a course for a safe system beyond the immediate reach of her homeworld. The journey ahead would still be challenging. Space was vast, dangers were real, and unknown threats awaited, but Lyra was ready. She had learned from Caleb, but she had also discovered her own strength, ingenuity and courage. She was no longer a helpless child. She was a survivor, a strategist, and a young being capable of shaping her own destiny. During the journey, Caleb taught her further lessons about human culture, philosophy, and problem-solving. He showed her examples of ingenuity, perseverance, and moral courage throughout human history. Lyra listened, fascinated by the stories of beings who, despite limitations, had achieved extraordinary feats through intelligence, patience, and compassion. She began to integrate these lessons into her own thinking, realizing that survival and strength were not only physical, but mental and ethical as well. Days passed, and Lyra's confidence grew. She repaired systems, piloted sections of the ship, and assisted Caleb in planning routes and anticipating potential dangers. She had learned that intelligence, observation, and careful action could overcome obstacles far greater than her size or strength. Each day reinforced the lessons of patience, ingenuity, and moral courage. One evening, as they rested on the observation deck, Lyra gazed out at the stars. She thought of her mother, of the exile that had seemed insurmountable, and of the human who had appeared when she had nearly lost everything. She realized that her journey had transformed her. She was no longer defined by fear or weakness. She was defined by knowledge, courage, and the ability to act with wisdom and integrity. Caleb approached her, placing a hand on her small shoulder. "You have learned much," he said. "Not just to survive, but to think, to act, and to care. That is true strength." Lyra nodded, understanding fully. She had discovered that survival was not about power alone. It was about intelligence, observation, strategy, and moral courage. Humans, though different from her species, had taught her lessons that transcended fear and weakness. As they continued their journey, Lyra began to think about the future. She would not return to the city or the council, not yet. Her purpose now was to learn, grow, and prepare for the challenges ahead. She would use her skills to protect herself, to help others, and to navigate a universe that was vast, dangerous, and full of opportunity. She had survived exile, learned courage, and discovered the extraordinary power of trust, knowledge, and moral strength. At night, when the stars shone brightly outside the ship, Lyra would lie beside Caleb and reflect on her journey. She had started as a helpless, frightened child, exiled and abandoned. Now she was a strategist, a learner, and a survivor. She had discovered courage, patience, and intelligence beyond what she had imagined possible. And she knew that the universe, vast and mysterious, held endless possibilities for those who acted with wisdom, ingenuity, and moral courage. Lyra had survived exile. She had learned to trust, to act, and to think. She had discovered the extraordinary power of intelligence, patience, and compassion. And as the ship sailed silently through the stars, carrying her to new worlds and new challenges, Lyra knew that she was ready. She was no longer a child defined by fear. She was a being defined by courage, knowledge, and the choices she would make in a universe that was vast, uncertain, and full of opportunity. Her journey had begun with loss and despair, but it had transformed into hope, strength, and empowerment. She had discovered that life, no matter how small or fragile, was worth protecting. She had discovered that courage and intelligence could overcome fear. And she had discovered that even in exile, one could rise to greatness through patience, observation, and moral strength. Lyra looked out at the stars one final time as she drifted into sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring new lessons, new challenges, and new adventures. She had survived exile. She had learned to act, to think, and to trust. And she knew, with a certainty that filled her heart, that she would continue to thrive, grow, and navigate the universe with intelligence, courage, and compassion. The little alien girl who had once been abandoned was no longer helpless. She had become a survivor, a thinker, and a being capable of extraordinary things. And she would continue her journey, guided by the lessons of her human companion, strengthened by her own intelligence and courage, and inspired by the limitless possibilities of the universe itself.